Return of the Mac. Michigan's movers and shakers turning out for the Mackinac Policy Conference, and it was loaded, including a first look at the Detroit mayoral candidates going head-to-head in a debate. We're also catching up with several different politicos, including Governor Gretchen Whitmer and Speaker of the House Matt Hall. It's Sunday, June 1st, and this is Flashpoint.
Happy Sunday morning, everybody, and welcome to Flashpoint from Mackinac Island, where we've been entertaining the Mackinac Policy Conference 2025 this week, where we've heard just a host of issues about how to push Michigan forward and tackle the issues facing this state through a bipartisan effort. A lot of different things came up in several fascinating discussions, embracing the future with AI, how to push Detroit forward and keep that momentum going of landing the big events, as well as another WNBA franchise. One of the other fascinating conversations we were able to have was with our pollster Richard Juba from Glenn Gariff Group. A new poll dropped this week just as the conference got underway in earnest, and it had some fascinating numbers about the races for governor and U.S. Senate.
The thing that stands out to me, and I think it's the question a lot of people have, is Mike Duggan's numbers. And what we see is we have a very close race amongst registered voters at 34-34 with Benson and James, and Duggan polling at 22. But what's really fascinating about those Duggan numbers is he is winning Metro Detroit against both candidates. He's taking 35 to 40% of the vote against every combination, but outstate, he's only polling 9 to 11% of the vote. So you see how drastically different his numbers are based on what portion of the state you're polling in. It's an opportunity for him. It's a challenge for him also.
Is this considered a great start for him, considering he's an independent?
Well, Michigan, you go back to the 1963 Constitution, we have not had an independent candidate start this strong at all. It's very rare for Michigan to be seeing this. It's also why we're going to see such a strange gubernatorial race. One of the really interesting questions I think we answer here is, who does Mike Duggan hurt? He equally takes from Republicans and Democrats.
Interesting.
So he's not hurting either one of them. He's hurting both parties' candidates.
So he can withstand any pressure. It won't come from one side or the other, because he could say, hey, I'm doing the same amount of damage either way. Talk to me about the Senate race. How are those numbers shaping up?
Well, we tested the different combinations, and one of the things we see is Mike Rogers comes in with, 75, 76% name ID already based on the previous race, compared to, for example, Haley Stevens at 43%, Abdul El-Sayed at 43%, and Mallory McMorrow at 21%. But when we do the head-to-heads, we look at registered voters, which is the big, broader one, versus definite voters, people saying they're definitely voting. Haley Stevens leads Mike Rogers by 1 point amongst registered voters, even though she only has 43% name ID, and amongst definite voters, that increases to 6%. And that's really interesting. She's bringing what I call kind of that independent magic with her numbers down in Southeast Michigan. She's more, I think, a stronger candidate than we would have expected with that name ID. Abdul El-Sayed has a real problem with independent voters. Whereas Haley Stevens and Mike Rogers are tied with independents, Rogers leads amongst independents with Abdul El-Sayed by over 20 points.
Yeah, they don't know him yet.
They don't know him, but they also don't know Haley Stevens.
Mm-hmm.
But she's polling better. So it's an interesting difference here. I think, Mallory McMorrow has a long way to go on name ID. I think when you look at that race, you're going to see a really intense primary between Haley Stevens and Abdul El-Sayed.
One of the other big issues here in the state is education, and that came up in my conversation with Republican Speaker of the House, Matt Hall. We started by getting into the budget process, which is getting nowhere fast, and it's very contentious. I asked him where we stand.
Well, I think we had some big announcements up here on the island talking about our budget and increasing the amount of money that our local school districts are going to get for the per pupil foundation by 20%. So under the Democrats' plan, it's like $10,000 per student that every district's going to get from the state, and we're going to raise that to $12,000. And what we're going to do is we're going to get rid, there's $1 billion in earmarks in education, many of which go to these for-profit companies. They siphon them off the top. We're going to try to get rid of that, and we're going to try to put that money right into our local school districts. And what we're also going to do is we're going to get rid of the over-regulation of our schools. These Lansing politicians put all these mandates on the spending. We're going to free that up a little.
Which mandates are you talking about?
Well, you look at it, they say, we're going to give you this money, you must spend it on transportation. You're going to get this, you must spend it on this and that and this. And I looked at it and said, what if they could do transportation 5% cheaper? They can't spend the money. So we're saying, you have the overall requirements, but you have the flexibility to spend the money how you want. But one thing we're still going to require, we're going to go back to every school district having a school resource officer. I've just seen firsthand how effective it is to have a school resource officer in your local schools. They build great relationships with the kids, and in my area, I've talked firsthand to our superintendents, and they're saying it makes a difference. So the Democrats gutted that in the last budget. We're going to put it back in.
Well, I'm glad you did bring up education. I just want to dive a little deeper because Democrats do have their own thoughts on that. Camillary's put a plan out.
Right.
Mayor Mike Duggan, who's running for governor, had some pointed thoughts on how he would reshape it. Obviously, you and the Republicans do as well. Given the numbers where Michigan kids are, you have to consider education a prime priority right now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and it's a little disappointing. It's not a topic that's really a focus at this conference. They keep talking about tariffs. I'll just tell you real quick. I've talked to several suppliers here and people that work for Whitmer, and they've been telling me actually they're seeing manufacturing opportunities for Michigan because of the tariffs. But the narrative here is tariffs are bad, and no one's talking about education. I think education is really important, and that's why we made that big announcement here that when the House Republican budget comes out, you're going to see that 20% increase in education in the local per pupil foundation allowance for your local districts. And then you're going to see a lot fewer regulations in our budget. So our superintendents have the flexibility to do the jobs in the local districts, because what you're seeing is when the Lansing politicians are mandating it, it's failing, it's not working. And then the other thing we announced up here is a brand new scholarship for every Michigan high school graduate. They're going to get $5,500 a year under the House plan, the Republican plan, for their first 4 years of college if they go to a Michigan university or college or community college. That's going to take a big bite out of the rising cost of higher ed, and it's going to make it more affordable, and it's going to help us to retain our Michigan students in our universities and then get them into the workforce.
How are we doing on the road funding? You have a plan yourself. The governor's put out her plan. Where do you think the common ground is going to end up being when it comes to fixing Michigan's roads?
Yeah, well, the governor ran on fixing the roads, and we didn't see any of that with our local roads. And so when I became Speaker, the House Republicans got together and we put together a plan to fix our local roads without raising taxes. Since Whitmer became governor, spending in Michigan has increased by 43%. We believe Michigan has the money, they're just not setting the right priorities. And so what we're proposing is to fix our local roads by prioritizing roads over the big corporations. And the governor and dedicating all of the money collected at the pump to roads. And you see some of your local leaders like Mark Hackle in Macomb County and Warren Evans in Wayne County who've been embracing a lot of my ideas. And we're just saying we give away billions of dollars a year to the 8 or 10 most connected corporations in Michigan. If we just treat them the same as everyone else, we can fix our roads without raising taxes. And then we're reining in the earmarked spending. The politicians and their pork projects, we're reining that in. Now the governor and the
there's
House,
transparency with that too now.
You're right.
That's the change, correct?
Yep. Yeah. The governor and the House Republicans agree on 50% of what should be done. We agree that all of the money collected at the pump should go to roads. And then we agree that $500 million in cuts need to be made. So that's $1.5 billion of the $3 billion we need. Where there's disagreement is, can we set better priorities with our spending for the other half, the other 1.5 billion, or should we do the governor's plan, which is to raise the corporate income tax on every business in Michigan? And I think with the increased spending, we shouldn't do that. I think it'll have the wrong effect.
When we come back here on Flashpoint, we're going to talk to Governor Gretchen Whitmer. And as we go to break, I had a chance to track down several of the candidates for U.S. Senate and governor and ask them one unusual question.
This one should be easy given your background, but imagine you're a Detroit Tiger. What would your walk-up music be?
It would be something Motown.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I would say for me, walk up would be Respect by Aretha Franklin.
That's a solid one. All
you
right.
can't go wrong with Aretha.
The Rocky song, obviously. Eye of the Tiger, always.
So
yeah, that's my running song when I run marathons.
Eye of the Tiger?
Pumped up, yeah. That when you start to hear that riff, it just gets you energized. So yeah, that would be my walk-up song.
I think I just go Americana. God bless the USA. So
my walk-up song would definitely be Swag Surfing, because the way that the Tigers are playing right now, we got more than anybody else in MLB.
Boom.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Turn Down for What?
Oh.
Yeah, or a Motley Crue song, Kickstart My Heart.
Well,
it's a tie. I don't like the video of the first one, but I do love Tommy Lee.
Welcome back to Flashpoint here on Mackinac Island. I'm Jason Colthorpe. Before our conversation this week with Governor Gretchen Whitmer, President Donald Trump had just been asked and then theorized possibly pardoning the people who were behind the plot to kidnap and kill the governor. Of course, that was the first question we asked her. Governor Gretchen Whitmer, thanks for being here and talking to us. The first question, obviously, I'm sure you've heard the president has talked about now actually considering a pardon for the people that attempted to kidnap and kill you, even going as far as saying they may have been railroaded. Do you agree that they've served enough time?
I'll just say this. I think anything short of condemning political violence does everyone a disservice. When that man shot at Donald Trump when he was on the campaign trail in Pennsylvania, I was one of the first public officials on either side of the aisle to condemn it. I don't care what someone's politics are. None of us signs up to have political violence, to be the target of political violence. It has ramifications for every one of us. People in the press get threats. I know that people who are on the bench get threats. It is, it's really dangerous. And so I would be very disappointed if they take that action.
And disappointed was the word I was thinking of. And you mentioned it, somebody who you'd think would empathize, who had two attempts on his life.
Yep. We see just how much hotter it's getting. I'm always asking people, bring down the temperature. You're creating a dangerous situation. I know when I run for office, I'm going to get criticized. I know that there will be dissent. I don't have any problem with that. But when it turns into political violence, every one of us should be calling it out.
A poll that came out while we were up here at the policy conference showed Michigan on the right track, wrong track, down a significant amount of points now, 45-37. And it was among strong Democratic voters and independents that lowered that number. Did that shock you?
The thoughts about the national economy, we know that there's a lot of pessimism. We know that people are very worried. You can feel it here at the conference. All the tariff chaos has created a lot of stress. Michigan is uniquely vulnerable. We're a big manufacturing state. We have a ton of agriculture, and we're heavily in the autos within manufacturing. All of those things make Michigan that much more vulnerable when, the Trump administration keeps changing all their tariff policy. We see businesses that aren't making the investments they plan to, or they're scaling back on their workforce. Mm-hmm. We see people who are not buying things, houses, or investing in the new roof that they need because of the uncertainty. And that's, I think, what is informing a lot of the concern. And frankly, I share it too as an individual, as a governor. I'm worried about it too.
I'm glad you brought up the manufacturing jobs. I'm sure you know the stats, 27,000 jobs gone in the last 6 years. With AI coming down the tracks, and we heard John McElroy talk about in the auto session yesterday that the number one gripe from automakers is they can't find people that want those factory jobs. Is it fair to say those jobs could never come back? And if you disagree with that, how do you get them back?
Well, the nature of business, the nature of manufacturing is always evolving. And that's why if we want to make sure that we are going to continue to have investment in Michigan, we've got to be able to outcompete other states, whether it is through policies that help Michigan stay competitive, or it is about upskilling our workforce so that we've got people who are nimble and can do everything from wiring up a new chip plant to operating that chip plant. It takes a whole different set of skills. Manufacturing looks very different than it did in the 50s, 60s, 70s, even 80s. It is clean, it is high tech, and you can make a good living in it. But we've got to do all these things in preparation for all the different changes that we're on the cusp of.
How do you see AI playing a role in that, considering some business leaders are saying political leaders are just so far behind in getting their head around this, and it could exacerbate unemployment numbers, and Michigan already has a high unemployment rate?
We are, I think, my attitude toward AI is we've got to be on the cutting edge.
Yeah.
We can't put our head in the sand and say, okay, well, we don't want, it makes us nervous, so let's look the other way. No, let's jump in. Let's make sure that data centers are built here. Let's make sure that chip plants that are going to power AI are built here from beginning to end. We got a lot of strengths, but we can't just sit back on our usual strengths. We got to continue to build new muscles.
One of the people that wants your job when you're all done with it, Mike Duggan, gave a speech last night talking about education and overhauling it, going as far as saying it needs to be accountability. If superintendents and principals don't get the job done, they need to be removed. And I know you've tried to tackle education, even though it probably nowhere near the numbers to your liking, but do you agree with what he's suggesting?
Listen, if you listen to my State of the State a few months ago, I was talking about accountability in education. Our North Star really needs to be focusing on literacy. This country is falling behind. Our state is as well. We've put a lot more resources in education, which we're long overdue. We closed the funding gap between schools. We've been able to give educators more resources with which to work, but we don't have better outcomes yet. And none of us is patient, especially when it comes to our kids. Your lifelong health and your lifelong wealth is impacted by whether or not you read. And that's why, as I take the stage later today, you'll hear me talk a lot about we can do hard things. Tackling literacy is a hard thing, but that's got to be what we're focused on.
A couple more things. Speaking of Mike Duggan, he left the Democratic Party, obviously. He used you as an example of one of the reasons why, when you compromise with the other side, dare to work with the White House, you just get ostracized by the party. Where are you with the Democratic Party? And after what happened with the White House, did it cross your mind, hey, I might leave this party eventually?
Well, first of all, the way you phrased it made it sound like he left the Democratic Party because of me.
I didn't need to do that.
What he said.
No, that's not it.
We've got a good working relationship. I'll just say this, he used the example that I went to the White House to fight for Michigan, and I took heat from it, from the left and the right, frankly. It's part of our politics today is knowing that no matter what you do, there's going to be a critic. And that's okay. When I was at the White House and I took grief and I put the folder in front of my face, I wish I hadn't done that. But I also knew at that time I was going to get suffrage done. That's something we've been working on for years in this state. Long before I even became governor, people were trying to get this done through Democrats and Republicans in the White House. After the election, I kind of had to tune out from the press for a while. No offense, but social media, all of it. It was so heavy and I was so disappointed at the result of the election. And then I realized, what? I'm governor. And I didn't realize just then that I was governor. I realized that I've got 2 years left. I got a lot of things I want to get done. People in Michigan are counting on me, and I got to show up no matter who is there. And that's the lesson from that. I'm a Democrat. I'm proud to be. I'm grateful, because I think that it really reflects the values of who I am and who our state is. So I'm not going to quibble with who's in what party, but I'll just say this. We need strong leadership in Lansing, and whomever comes after me, I hope will continue the work that we've gotten started and continue the trajectory that we're on, because it's precarious because everything in DC, but we're on the right path.
Well, the Democratic Party is certainly happy to hear you say that. And according to Nancy Kaffer's article this week in The Free, which said you may be the only true hope for president for the Democratic Party. Without asking you that, I know you've sounded off on you're going to retire. Do you agree that you might be the best choice as for the Democrats if you ever do so choose to run?
You're hilarious, Jason. First of all, I'm not going to retire. I may never.
You used that word once upon a time.
No, they said, "What are you looking for?" I said, "Retired." I was joking.
Yeah.
I'm 53 years old as we talk. I've got a lot of things that I want to get done. I don't know that any of them requires that I run for another office, but I expect to be very much involved one way or another, and still be doing work that feels like it's got purpose. And that's what I've loved about this job.
Fair enough. Governor, thank you so much. I always appreciate your time.
Thanks, Jason.
We're coming right back on Flashpoint after this.
Welcome back to Flashpoint. You could argue the biggest event of the entire conference came Thursday night when several of the candidates for Detroit mayor tangled in a debate. Here are some of the key highlights.
It doesn't matter how experienced you are if your experiences don't change the experiences of the people that live in this city. It's not about us. That's what we got to remember. It's about the people we are elected to serve.
Frederick Hall?
Well, I disagree. Experience is important. We are in a critical time here in the city of Detroit, and we cannot turn that over to someone who has to have on-the-job training.
If you want to see the growth and prosperity in Detroit continue downtown and in neighborhoods, I am your candidate. If you want a mayor with the experience and track record to be ready on day one, then I'm asking for your support.
The ability to handle a crisis and make decisions in real time, as it's already been talked about. This cannot be on-the-job training. There's no book for this. You need someone who can plug in and do it right and do it the first time.
As your next mayor, with the support of you all, I will make sure that Detroit is the best place in America to grow and start a business. We will ensure that housing is affordable and there is a path to home ownership. We will ensure that our educational system is improved, that our neighborhoods are invested and walkable and vibrant, and that our communities are safe.
Now, before we go on this Sunday morning, the Chamber and the Mackinac Policy Conference had a chance to honor my friend and colleague and the guy who started this program some 35 years ago, Devin Skillion, for all his contributions over the years that he's given to this and what this event means. Here's a little taste of that.
I appreciate this, but I've taken twice as much as I've given, that's for sure. It's meant a lot to me. You all have meant a lot to me. You guys have all been a part of the Flashpoint family.
We'll give. Thank you all.
And that'll do it from the Mackinac Policy Conference and this week's episode of Flashpoint. I'll see you again next week in studio. I'm Jason Colthorpe. See you later.